When talking about the history of anime and what exactly counts as the first, there are a few answers people usually go for. Many experts will point out the Japanese short films that were created through 1907 and on, or the full-length animated films which followed. Since they both have some aspects that have a vague anime aesthetic to them, it might be debatable what exactly the first true start was. However, the one animation most people have always touted as the first true anime was Astro Boy, since it was the first Japanese animated TV show, and along with many other shows that came out around the same time, there is enough in common between them and modern anime to say that they were the first true animes. One thing early Japanese animated films have in common with the 60s TV shows was the Disney influence. There were a lot of Japanese animators like Osamu Tezuka that put their own spin on the Disney style in order to be more appealing, and because they were also heavily inspired by the Disney films of that time. From 1945 onward, there was a short film to movie boom, and Toei Animation rose to prominence, as the first, anime studio. Osamu Tezuka first started animation there, but was fired due to a dispute. Osamu then moved to Mushi Productions, and this is where Astro Boy was made. Many out there consider Osamu Tezuka the godfather of anime, as he continued the styles that were started by the early Japanese animators. Back in the day, there were animators known as the fathers of anime. They started out in manga and then moved on to working on propaganda pieces and short films. But to me, I don't think that most, not all but most, of the short and feature-length films that came out resemble anime enough to call it that. But all the TV animated shows that came out in the 60s are not all that far off at all compared to modern anime. There's many characteristics and motifs that were born through these shows, and I would say they look exactly how you would think the oldest anime would look. And as you may know, as an inspiring comic book artist, I've been greatly inspired by the world of anime. So I decided to study, analyze, and fully understand anime, and understand the evolving trends in storytelling and animation, and learn what makes up some of my most favorite genres and styles. And because I'm an autistic completionist, I had to see if I could unearth as many old shows as I could possibly find, hoping that I can maybe find some hidden gems. I documented my thoughts for shits and giggles and thought others could get something out of it. I don't have a ton to say about every show, however, I want to breeze through as many shows as I can, so that, some people out there could find something that interests them, even if I'm not totally into it. There were a lot of really boring, shitty shows no one should ever watch, but many hidden gems worth checking out. As all the savvy anime fans know, there were a lot of mecha shows. I found a lot of them to be way too similar for my taste, and thought it would be better to skip most of them for now, and maybe talk about them later in the future. So I started with a bunch of shows from 1963 onwards, and in no particular order, and the first show that caught my attention that I decided to randomly start with was a show called Big X, done by yours truly, Osamu Tezuka, or Osamu Tezuka, however you want to fucking pronounce his name, I have no idea. Now, there's not that much footage out there of Big X. At the time of writing this, I did find episode 1 and episode 11, along with episode 40 through 50, which were the only surviving footage from the early part of the show, and, funnily enough, I was finally able to find someone who posted some of the episodes on YouTube as well, and, well, I can't really hate the show. I mean, there are many things to appreciate about it, but with that being said, it is really ridiculous. So anyways, the show is basically about this. There are these two scientists from World War II that made a weapon that can grow things and basically turn you into a superhero. And I don't know why, but for some reason, they put the instructions of how to build this weapon on some piece of metal square thing. And guess where they hid it? They stuck it in one of the scientist's kid. After that, a shit ton of years go by, and the kid grows up and has a family of his own. What ends up happening is, many years later, now of 40 years of age and with a family of his own, the kid is now suffering from this toxic foreign metal being inside his body for so long. I don't know, for some reason, there's just something about the way the story is told that I just find a little awkward. That the scientist kid, grows up, has a family of his own, and he gets so sick from this metal being inside his body for so long from when he was a kid, he dies, and his son becomes the superhero. To bring it all back, it ended up being the scientist's grandson that ended up inheriting the powers of Big X. And how did he get this succession? How did he get these powers? From a metal that was inside his dad from when he was a child. It's just, I don't know. There's something about it that is just really fucking weird and awkward about it to me. Like for example, imagine if people asked the superheroes, "Hey bro, how did you get your powers?" "Oh, from inside my dad." Like, the fucking weird. And pretty much at the introduction of the main characters, the son that had the metal square thing with the blueprints for the Big X device becomes deathly ill. How is it that after all these years of having this weird piece of mysterious metal that is poisoning his body, just now getting sick from it? Kinda unrealistic that a 40 or 50-year-old man would react this late from having something inside his body for so long. Anyways, at the start of the show, there are Nazis that kidnap them from the hospital and they end up stealing the metal thingy. And I guess, magically within just a few hours, they were able to assemble this extremely complex machine. I mean, shit, I understand that cartoons are supposed to be unrealistic, but Jesus. And as things go on, of course, some bullshit happens. The dumbass criminals broil a rat, and the son breaks free and figures out a way to use the machine to turn into the superhero Big X. I mean, I gotta be honest, I mean, the battle scene was kind of cool. You know, the animation is what you would expect from the time. As the episode ends, you know, the ending is kind of just meh, you know, not super interesting. And, you know, the kid's dad, you know, the first scientist's son, dies and basically gives him the speech of, you have to use the Big X weapon to fight for truth and justice and blah 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 blah. Again, I don't hate this cartoon, but it is fun to watch for how silly and ridiculous it is, but I can't tell you that I'm in too much of a hurry to go watch it again. Alrighty, so the next show I watched was a show called Tetsujin 28 Go, or at least I think that's how it's pronounced, I have no idea. And I guess as far as giant robots are concerned, this show is a pioneer of its time, and, you know, I could sort of see the influence that so many other super robot shows have taken from. And from what I've seen of the show, it definitely could turn out to be an interesting adventure show. I still think the show is super cheesy and ridiculous though. But hey, you know, it's an old cartoon. What would you expect from a cartoon from this era? And of course, when I'm saying this, I'm primarily thinking about the bank robbers. They were so awesomely bad, but in a good way. So the story is basically about this kid whose dad recently just died, and I gotta say, for what it's worth, I would say the show handled the concept of this kid's dad dying pretty well. It was fairly effective, you know, kinda sad. As the show starts off and we're introduced to the main character, we see the scene where the kid finally says goodbye to his dad, and I really enjoyed it because the scene really lingers on and lets you feel the emotional weight of the scenario. You know, for its time, the scene is pretty good. And when comparing it to other shows that came out around the same time, I would say that this death scene probably has to be my favorite out of most of the other scenes that I've seen thus far. After the kid's dad dies, I guess the best friend and assistant to, you know, the main character's dad takes him to an island where the kid's dad worked on his most prestigious invention, a giant fucking robot. From what I could tell from the first few episodes that I watched, the show just seems like a continual adventure of chasing around this robot and stopping him from doing too much harm, and while also using him to get back at some of the bad guys that are up to no good. Now, I wasn't too entirely interested in the show. In fact, I nodded out a few times, but I do in fact see what people like about it, and for what it is, I do appreciate it. And also, I could see myself coming back to the show one day and, you know, possibly binge some more episodes, but as of right now, you know, I need to move on. Anyways, so after all that, the next show I watched was a show called Tobor the 8-Man. Now, this gets a little interesting because I actually, surprisingly enough, have a little bit of background with the show. You see, when I was little, I got one of the volumes from the 99-cent store, and, you know, just because I thought the cover looked cool, like a cartoon I'd watch, you know, I had a roommate that was really into old cartoons and stuff like that, and he bought a bunch of them from the 99-cent store, and, you know, this is one of the ones that I saw that I thought looked cool. And, you know, I mean, at the time when I was younger, I liked it overall, and pretty much after all these years, I've always wanted to see whether or not the show was any good, or if it was just my nostalgia, because I just loved the concept at the time. I loved anything having to do with superheroes, and, you know, I don't know, I thought the concept was really cool and badass looking stuff. And overall, despite the narrative being a little jumbled, I would say out of all these shows, this has got to be my favorite thus far. As soon as I started the first episode, I quickly realized that this would be my kind of show. You see, I love cool looking character design guys punching people in the face for adventures and shits and giggles. Of course, anyone could say, and many have, that the art style and animation are still lacking, but because of the age, I forgive it, and I think the tone definitely does help add to things, you know, where the animation lacks. But just considering what it was for its time, like, it was pretty revolutionary, and for what it is, looks pretty nice. So when the show starts off, we get to see our protagonist, who is a investigator slash policeman. He ends up getting killed on the job, and of course, conveniently, right after the fact, a scientist named Dr. Genius took him to his lair and turned him into the cyborg superhero 8-Man. I guess you could say the biggest problem with the first episode is that it's essentially just an exposition piece. Now, I still find it pretty entertaining, but it is very drawn out and oversimplistic. The next 9 episodes I watched weren't all that complex either, and of course they're extremely formulaic. There are so many episodes that have to do with illegal guns, and these aren't just any guns, these are these multi-chamber looking things that look absolutely retarded. I also noticed there are so many anime-esque things in it, like the ninja run that 8-Man does, like it looks nearly identical to the run that, you know, Naruto and so many other shonen anime do. I'd say out of all these shows, if you're in the least bit interested in 60s TV anime, I would say that Astro Boy and definitely 8-Man are definitely ones to check out for sure. The next thing I watched was a short called Osu. It's a short which came out in 1962. What happens in it is, it shows a dark room and this spotlight is showing us glimpses into the room. And with that we get to see a cat and a man, and they're both sitting with their significant other. You can see that the cat does not want the man to be there, and the man just sits there solemnly on the bed. With the spotlight, the animation doesn't show very much of the characters, and a lot of the times we can only see shapes, which of course leads the viewer to build suspicion since we can't see what's fully going on. If you haven't watched the show, I would actually recommend you do so. I mean, it's short, and for what it is, it's pretty well done. As the plot twist gets revealed, we see that the man had stabbed and killed his wife. And I'm totally going out on a limb here, but I guess that the whole intention of the short was reveal that the cat always compared humans to animals. And one can obviously infer that the commentary is saying that humans are just like animals in their extreme behavior. Have you ever gotten angry and then later you go to think about what happened and you can't remember every single detail because you were so upset? Tunnel vision and anger, run side by side.